Well, it's that time of year again, the oh-so-wonderful tax season. The day out of every other day of the year that reminds us exactly how much of our hard-earned money the government takes away from us. It's just every other day that reminds us how stupidly the government spends it. Take a look.
This Wednesday is April the 15th, the day every year when Wesley Snipes pokes his little head out of his burrow and if he sees his own tax return, quickly dives back in. And like clockwork, tax season brings with it an annual gnashing of teeth.
Two dreaded words this time of year, tax time. It is tax day today. Maybe you're holding your nose while finishing up your taxes.
Tax season officially begins. Ugh.
Tax season. Tax season. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
Happy Tax Day, everybody. That's sarcasm, of course.
As if giving our money to the government isn't bad enough, filing our taxes is a huge pain too, a stress in and of itself. So who do you trust to do your taxes? TurboTax? TaxAct? Some of the free software out there? Or the expensive accountants or chain tax preparers? Here with me now to answer that question is tax expert and CEO of Polus Accounting and Consulting, Andrew Polos. Welcome back, Andrew.
Hey, Liz. Good to see you.
You too. Which do you recommend, Andrew? Accountants, do-it-yourself taxes, or tax software online?
You know, it really all depends on the taxpayer and the situation they have. For someone who has a simple return, maybe one W-2, two W-2s, certainly using an online tax software probably would work just as good. When you get into complex tax matters, folks who have itemized deductions, rental properties, stocks, just more investments, more complex returns, at that point you got to really be wise and think and ask if you are going to do it yourself or if you want someone who's highly qualified, who's skilled in doing that kind of a return to help you.
All right, Andrew, you're an accountant, so I promise to keep the accountant jokes to a minimum here. But tell us how to choose a good accountant. What are the signs to look for one who's honest, trustworthy, licensed, and what to avoid?
Certainly. Obviously, doing a little bit of research goes a long way these days because not everyone in the tax industry is licensed and qualified to obviously be doing taxes. Probably somewhere about 60 to 70% of folks out there that do taxes this time of the year are tax shops that open up during tax season, aren't licensed. They close down after tax season, and they're nowhere to be found afterwards if you need help. Looking online for good reviews, checking with some of the accounting tax associations, such as the National Society of Accountants, National Association of Tax Professionals. They have a list of professionals in every state that they could probably recommend. And of course, always asking, a friend or a colleague if they've had a good experience with someone. That goes a long way as well.
Yeah, that sounds smart to me. Always do your research. All right, let's talk about the tax software. This is how I personally do my taxes, the software that you can get on your own laptop. But what are your thoughts on this? Any free software, even the paid stuff that's not too expensive, that you'd either recommend or recommend we stay away from?
Certainly, there's a slew of tax softwares online, that anything from free, totally free. Some of them charge for the state tax return filings, minimal, maybe $5 to $10, $15, and others are more expensive. This year on my list, of course, of my national syndicated online tax softwares, I've got TurboTax ranking on top of the list for the obvious reasons. They're good at what they do and what they provide. They're a little bit pricier than some of the others, but you're going to get probably better results and a better software to use versus some of the others on the list that go down to, just one price taxes and some that are just no-name brands, essentially. H&R Block is good for those that want some assistance, perhaps going into a retail store to get, in-person assistance. That's where an H&R Block comes in handy. So it really depends on the person's needs.
Okay, that's really a relief. I was sitting here holding my breath, hoping you weren't going to name the service that I use as one of the ones to stay away from. So glad to hear it's not on that list. Andrew, millions of people lose millions of dollars every year on tax day. I'm not just talking about how much the government takes from us. I'm talking about scammers taking our money, crooks coming and taking our money. So talk to us a little bit about what we should look for to avoid, how people try to scam you out of your money under the guise of being from the IRS.
Look, there's all kinds of scams, obviously, but we have to distinguish between bad tax preparers and scammers that are out there trying to get your money. The group that falls under the scammers are those that are trying to get your Social Security number, which means they're going to file a bogus tax return with your Social Security number, claim independence that don't exist, so they can get the earned income credit and get a tax refund. Those are the biggest challenges facing the IRS these days, is how to stop and slow down the scammers and the crooks. So you've got that element of it, and you have to be careful. This is, again, where it comes into asking questions and checking to make sure that the person you're going to use, whether it's someone you find online or locally at a retail store, that they're qualified, they're licensed, or even if they're not licensed, that that you feel comfortable. They're going to be there year-round, or they're going to be able to assist, essentially. So you have to really be smart. If something doesn't sound right or doesn't seem right, you can always step away and go find someone else.
Sure. So it basically comes back to the research then, because you do have to give your Social Security number if you're having someone else do your taxes. I mean, that's part of the tax forms. You can't avoid that. You can't just put, I'd check the box, I'd prefer not to disclose my Social Security number. You do have to give that.
Indeed, you do have to give the information. That's why it goes back to being able to be smart and ask questions and making sure you feel comfortable with the person that's going to do your taxes. Someone who just opened up, next to the gas station may not be the person you want doing your taxes.
That's where my accountant lives, Andrew. No, I'm kidding. Okay, talk to me a little bit about the transfer of information, because a lot of us, even if we have someone else help do our taxes, we don't necessarily meet them in person or go there in person. So there's a transfer of information that's necessary for all of our expenses. What are the things to look out in that aspect to make sure that we're not endangering our information?
Correct. Obviously, if you're going to send someone's information, your information via the internet, then certainly you want to make sure you're sending it password protected and that the information is secure. And vice versa. If a tax preparer or if an accountant's going to send you a tax return, the completed work for you to review and sign off on via some electronic method, email particularly, you want to make sure that it's going to be coming password protected. So you want to ask these questions on the front end if you're not going to see someone in person. How do you get the information to me? How do you expect me to get the information to you effectively? How do you store the information after tax season's done? Where is it being stored? Who's got access? So these are questions that people, good licensed, qualified tax preparers and tax professionals are going to expect, basically. They're not unreasonable. If anyone feels offended that you're asking these kind of questions, they're probably not going to be.
There's probably a reason for that anyway. So basically you're saying
Exactly.
It's worth our time and money to be a little extra paranoid this time of year, because it does have to do with all of our personal information, our financial data, and then ultimately our money. Andrew, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you one final question, and this is the age-old tax question, and that is itemizing. Is it worth the time and trouble or not worth it?
Just depends. That's always the million-dollar answer in the tax business, isn't it?
Yes.
But it really depends. Obviously, if you have enough to itemize, then yes, it's worthwhile.
All right, Andrew, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was great to talk to you. Up next, investigative journalist James O'Keefe exposes the threat of voter fraud in New Hampshire and some foreign campaign workers of Bernie Sanders who might be violating the law.